Welcome to the Kaleidoscope of Possibilities, Alternative Perspectives on Mental Health. My name is Dr. Adriana Popescu. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist and leader in the field of mental health, energy psychology, addiction, trauma, and empowerment. In this podcast, we will be exploring mental health from a variety of perspectives, from the spiritual to the shamanic and beyond. What if mental illness isn't everything we think it is? What if everything we see as a pathology is actually a possibility? What else is possible with mental health? Hi, everyone. Dr. Adriana Popescu here with you with another episode of Kaleidoscope of Possibilities, Alternative Perspectives on Mental Health. Oh, my kitty Wookie has also made an appearance, my little feline assistant here, if you can see him. I'm so excited to have with me today as my guest, Wendy Adamson. Wendy is a mental health professional who has spent over 25 years serving individuals struggling with addiction and mental health disorders. In that time, she's provided counseling, facilitated groups, done interventions, crisis management, and executed treatment planning, which has helped countless individuals. Wendy also has multiple articles in the Huffington Post and 2 published memoirs, Motherload and Incorrigible, where she shares her own struggles with addiction and her ultimate recovery, which led to the profound healing within herself and her family. Welcome, Wendy.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm just so honored that I'm a guest of yours. Thank you.
Thank you. I always like to ask my guest in the beginning, especially, to tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got to where you are today doing the work that you're doing.
Well, I think that, I have a lot of experience, my own experience. Like I do work in addiction and mental health, and I had my own experience with a mother that was schizophrenic, first of all. And, back when I was growing up in the 50s, it was, there was a lot more stigma. There is a lot of stigma around mental illness today. But back then, it was like my father's solution was to swear the family into secrecy. Don't tell anybody. Don't tell your friends. Don't tell, the nuns so it was like, and with secrecy comes a lot of suffering, and unexpressed, fear, anxiety, just the gambit. And all through my developmental years, growing up in the first 7 years, she was constantly trying to kill herself. So it was in fight, flight, or freeze. And she succeeded killing herself when I was 7. And when I found out the details of which would be later as a teenager, I said it would never, ever be like my mother. But I think that when you swear you'll never be like your mother, it's like giving the universe the exact coordinates to where you're later going to land. My inability to forgive her, my inability to let go of my resentments, pretty much carved a course for my life as I walked in her footsteps, as I ended up in the same institution she had been in. She had a psychotic break when she was 38 and killed herself. And I had a psychotic break, drug-induced psychotic break at 38. And it's like I ended up in jail with domestic violence. I caught my husband cheating on me. So it was, it's a crazy story. I do have a crazy story, and it's good content for memoirs. I've got many lives I've lived. And so, however, that wasn't the plan. I wasn't planning on writing when I was experiencing all this. I was deeply wounded, deeply hurt, and, did not know how to get out of the cycle of addiction. I think the only language I spoke as an active addict or alcoholic was victimese, and so I blamed everybody. But that's very disempowering to blame my mother, blame my father. And now I was blaming my ex-husband at the time, my husband. But, and it just like I was in county jail, and like, how did I get here? Like, what happened? Where did my
Mhm.
life get so far off track from that little girl that, wanted to make a difference in the world? And thus,
Mhm.
that it started my second chance, if you will. It was like my second chance. And there was a lot of damage, like with my own two sons, as there is with addiction and alcoholism. So there was a lot of, you know, repair that needed to be done. And I
Mhm.
knew that, I mean, I wanted it to happen immediately, but I knew that, it would, I mean, I knew it would take time. I knew it take I had, and it wasn't just about this time saying, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for what I've done. It was about changing my behavior, which would, which for me was a lot of effort and time and, making a lot of mistakes along the way. But at early on in my sobriety, I got sober in um, 93. Early on in my sobriety, I found that, I had unique experience. I had, um, unique experience that possibly could help somebody else. So I got a job as a drug and alcohol counselor. And it's, where I started to see, like, people, I was working in a medical detox. And I started to see that everybody that sat across from me at my desk, I, could share my experience with, and how, and I think that that immediately connected me to them. And it felt like everything I had been through had value. It was like requalified. I was using it as a tool to help somebody instead of hiding it as a secret, like what I had learned, you know?
Right.
And so um, that has, that kind of changing the perception of like, are changing like uh, from the language of victimese and like, how can I serve? How can I serve is like more my question today is like, how can I use this? I think that everything, that nothing has to be wasted. It can all be used as long as I'm willing to share. If I'm
Yeah.
hiding it, then it's like I'm not using it.
No. In fact, you're depriving the world and you're depriving people of information that might actually be the thing they need to hear to change their own life, right? We've
Yeah. Go
we've
ahead.
really come a long way with this. Yeah, no, I just wanted to say, like, we've come such a long way with this because I mean, I remember being a kid in the 70s and what how stigmatized mental health still was back then. And if you went to a therapist or something, the head shrank, it meant something was really wrong with you and you were totally crazy. I've only really seen in the last maybe 10, 15 years, like a real movement toward destigmatization of mental health treatment.
Yeah, I don't remember ever hearing the word trauma, growing up. It was like then I do remember hearing some talk about PTSD when it came to soldiers in the Vietnam War coming home. Oh, they have shell shock, they have PTSD. But it's like for kids, they're resilient, they'll get over it just like, it's like it was like, but to top it off, the secrecy around it really made me and my siblings shut down. And, we all dealt with it in our different ways, but it's none of it good. None of us really handled it well. And it wasn't until I
Right.
got sober that I actually experienced the grief that I never processed as a kid,
Mhm.
and, being sober, being present, finding kind of a spiritual, expanding my spiritual world really helped with that.
Yes. Yes. And rewriting your story, as you said, from being a victim to being a survivor, maybe even a thriver, of life. I think that's huge. And a big part of the work is, I work in addiction treatment as well. And moving people out of that story of victimhood where there are core beliefs, like our friend TJ Woodward likes to call them core false beliefs about that we come to believe about ourselves. Like there's something fundamentally wrong with me. I am broken. I am defective in some way. And I have to hide that because I can't let other people see how broken I am, or else they'll reject me. They'll judge me. And so, yeah, living in secret. And as they say in AA, you're only as sick as your secrets. That holding in of all of that creates this toxic shame that erodes away at people, and usually it just ends up keeping them stuck in an addictive pattern.
Yeah, and I think that, I'm reading, and I'm gonna just like give her a plug, Melissa Phoebos's book Body Work, about
Mm,
writing and the therapeutic value of writing. And she talks about, the stigma victimhood as being an oppressive power to gaslight people, like, so as far as like, all of the people, all of the women that came forth in the Me Too movement, to oppress them, to keep it a secret because they're being dramatic, whining, attention grabbing, or beating a dead horse. And by convincing someone that their story, it's it's more disempowerment. It continues to disempower them. But to stand, and speak your truth is empowering. It's like
yeah.
I always felt like I was pulling a chameleon, pulling personalities out of a Rolodex, and being this for one person, being that for another. But, it's like when I wrote my book, my first book, Motherload, it was it was so scary. And I actually felt like I was breaking free from that contract with my family to keep secrets. Like I had done it on other levels, but coming out publicly, it was like almost like getting naked in the world, and I had no control of the narrative. And a lot of shame came up, and I was surprised because I had a lot of time sober. I had done a lot of therapy or done a lot of work on myself, and I was shocked how it literally like opened the mother lode of shame. But what
Yeah.
happened in writing it and putting it out there in the world, it was like, and getting through the first wave, the shame no longer owned me. It no longer owned me. And I realized how that kind of shame keeps us small, keeps us in our box and
Yes.
afraid to take risks, and it's like, because I was always afraid to take a risk. I was always afraid to show my first writing a bad draft because I might be judged. Oh, what, I felt like I had that fraud syndrome, like, what do I got to say? But, working
Mhm.
in this field was kind of like, in hindsight, I can see it was training ground for me to learn how to use my experience as a tool. And I remember this one time, I think recovery is recovering aspects of ourselves and selves that we have abandoned, parts of ourselves that we have abandoned. And when I went to juvenile hall and talked to girls, I used to go there a lot. I used to go a lot when I first got sober. And it was this moment where I was talking to them about my experience in the same juvenile hall that I had been in as a kid. Because as a kid, I was labeled incorrigible,
Mhm.
which by the way, by definition means beyond reform, and they still call teenagers that today in court systems. They call them incorrigible, beyond reform, or un, unrepairable. So, but
Yeah.
when I stood there talking to those girls, it felt like opening up a portal, if you will, and like to the girl that I abandoned at 14, to the girl I left behind at 15. Every time I drank, every time I used, every time I got into a toxic relation and became the incredible shrinking woman,
Mhm.
it was like recovery. It was like recovery 101. I'm by being of service to somebody else, I am recovering parts of myself, you know.
Yes. Yes. And if we were to use like maybe more like a more spiritual perspective on that, like the shamans would call that a soul retrieval, right?
Yeah.
That in life, we leave bits and pieces of ourselves or abandon ourselves in these different ways. And I think any kind of, whether it's recovery, from addiction or just working on yourself in general, there can be this aspect of retrieval, reclaiming, or owning parts that you never even allowed yourself to even be, like the Jung's idea of the golden shadow, which is something like not a lot of people are familiar with. When we talk about shadow, it's usually like all the negative stuff, like we hide the stuff we hide, the shame, the secrets, the things we did that we're not proud of, our belief systems, about ourselves, whatever is what they would say we put in the shadow. But the other things we put in the shadow are also sometimes our strengths, our gifts and talents, the things that actually make us shine. And they call that the golden shadow, because we hide those things as well, because we don't want other people to feel bad that we're good at something, or we don't want to be too much in the spotlight because then we might get judged or rejected. And how many people have suppressed all of that as well? I wonder if you discovered that also in your process.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've never heard of the golden shadow. I like that because I did a lot of shadow work, um, you know, uh, which was very insightful and helped me integrate aspects of myself as well. But I've never heard that before, the golden shadow. But yeah, I was afraid of being too much. It's just I'm too much because I felt like, my energy, my spirit, or, whatever, the way I was beyond my personality was too much, and so turn it down, turn it down. And that's like, yeah, turn it down. And but it's like the how often we're prescribed somebody else's narrative about ourselves, whether it be in the school system, whether it be in the media or social media today. We're these things are implied that we're supposed to be a certain way. And I mean, I think that's why a lot of teens are questioning gender, because they're questioning, because who says that we're supposed to be this way? I was,
Right.
a little bit of a tomboy when I was a kid, and, supposed to be more girly and stuff, but, I enjoyed climbing trees and stuff. But I adopted narratives about my life. And, I think that fear, controlled me, the fear and the I adopted through my father or from school, or it controlled me. And yeah, being too much of the golden shadow, like you said, you know,
Mhm.
and taking risks, like it, like making mistakes. I was so afraid to make mistakes that
Mhm.
that kept me small as well, you know.
Mhm.
But writing has taught me, and at first I found a very I found a safe women's group, writing women's group, and where I felt safe, where there were strong boundaries by the facilitator. And I started, taking risks, putting myself out there. And I found, that it was well received, and I felt supportive, even if it wasn't perfect, And so that gave me the courage to keep going. Well, because I mean, uh, I actually mother load. I told TJ this too. The book was, I was doing a meditation intensive at Agape, um, you know, down here in LA, and during meditation, I had what I would call, for lack of a better word, a download, meaning I knew, like, I was supposed to write my book. I knew the arc. I knew that it was meant to help people, and I knew that was part of why I was here, part of my purpose. and part of the reason I went through everything that I did. I tried to ignore that voice or that download, whatever you want to call it. I tried to ignore it for 10 years. I talked about it. I'm going to write a book. I'm going to write a book. I mean, I got so sick of hearing myself say it that I go, either you're going to write the book or you're going to stop talking about it. That was 10 years to get there, you know?
Yeah.
And that's when I found that safe women's group that was so beneficial, so therapeutic in nature.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I was going to ask you. I mean, the process of writing a memoir. I mean, I've known people who've gone through this, and how powerful it is. Like, people don't, I think, realize until they get into it, like how deep and profound it is to revisit your own life's experiences, and sometimes look at it through a different lens for the first time. Difficult, but also incredibly rewarding is the general sense that I have.
Well, it is. I mean, it's difficult. It's, you know, you're like looking under the hood, you know, and it's like you're going back to the scene of the crime, and you know where I may have disassociated, where I might have used drugs or found food, whatever, to check out. But in the writing, I'm there. I am being present. It's my memory. Yes, it's my memory, but it's like I kept hitting walls, you know. My older brother was also schizophrenic. And, you know, he could get violent. So um, my sister and I used to sleep with a chair propped up against our door, afraid that he'd come and chop us to bits. So as I was writing a chapter about him, I really felt sick to my stomach. You know, I felt very sick to my stomach. And I'd have to get up, go for a walk, and clear the energy and come back, you know, or maybe come back to it the next day. But I kept hitting blocks, you know, like, you know, blocks. And it was just, you know, I can't do this. It's like, I can't do this. And you know, I would, you know, call on the universe to do it through me. You know, if I'm supposed to do it through me, because I just feel like I can't do it. You know, it was just, I had to continue to get myself out of the way. I had to continue. And what helped me was knowing who I wanted to reach. Okay. So I knew that, like, meaning, I mean, there was a lot of people I wanted to reach. I wanted to reach mothers. I wanted to reach fathers or children that are angry with their parents over addiction, because it's ultimately a story about healing. It's all, and it's a story about hope. And I think it's a message worth telling right now, is that, you know, in spite of the mistakes you've made, you can heal the family system. It takes one person to wake up. And I've been waking up one eyelash at a time, it seems like, but I was committed to, you know, changing the trajectory of mental illness and addiction to one of healing. That became my intention. But when I was writing the book, I go, I wonder, you know, what it would have felt like if some woman in jail would have had a book like mine. I wonder what some girl in juvenile hall, you know, would it make a difference in their life if they had a message of hope? So I thought about them. I envisioned them. And it was interesting because a few months after the book was out, somebody read it and said to me, your book can help women that are locked up. I said, I know, that's why I wrote it. And she goes, well, I want to donate 30 books for you to get into jail. So, you know, I was just more validation. The universe is telling me I'm on the right track, but it's not that easy getting things in there. You know, you can't just drop off books. Right. But I happen to have a friend that works as supervisor's office in LA. So she goes, bring them to me. I'll get them in there. You know, and she bypassed it all. She had read the book by then, and she says it's a good book for them. It's very filled with hope. So it was like sitting at my computer, having that desire to want to reach people that were incarcerated. I couldn't figure that out. All I had to do was like do the next indicated step and let go of the results. And, it's something bigger than me figured it out.
Yes, very much. It sounds like consciousness was really working through you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Um, so we've talked a little bit about, here about the transformative and healing power of writing and writing memoir. I'm curious what other modalities or approaches you used as part of your recovery process.
Well, I have what someone that I consider a healer, energy and a healer, and pretty gifted. And I saw her through. I've seen her through dark periods, dark nights of the soul. So I do utilize her. I would say it's somatic in nature. Um, I've done therapy. I've done steps. Uh, you know, uh, I get out in nature. I meditate. I pray. Uh, I believe in. I believe in the transformative power of of consciousness when you surrender fully to it. And it's again just me getting out of the way. But is that what you were asking? Did that?
Yeah. I mean, just curious, I always love hearing from people what helped them because similarly to you, I mean, part of what I'm doing with this podcast is educating people and wanting to give give them hope that, if you are someone who struggles with an addiction or a mental health issue of some sort, that you're not necessarily doomed to be a victim of that for the rest of your life, that there are a ton of approaches and modalities and techniques and people that can support you in changing whatever it is that's led you to where you are, that and the stuff that's not working. So I'm always curious about people's healing journey. And I think especially the spiritual, which is the less often talked about aspect of healing.
Well, that's is been the biggest part of my experience. I was fortunate enough early in sobriety to do an intensive with Siddha meditation yoga, and had a spiritual experience there. And my sister gifted me that intensive because she said I was right for it. I had a transformative experience when a kid was shot in front of my apartment. A kid, 19 years old, he was laying in the street, and I was like barely sober, right? It was Mother's Day. And, it was like, for some reason, I went to the kid. That was totally a contrary action for me, as he lay dying in the street. And I stayed with him till the police came. And, it was like everything stopped, if you will, and became like I was so in the moment. It was like curtains came down around me and him. And, when the police got there, the police thought I was his mother until they figured it out. But that night when and my son and I were living in transitional living, and I was on welfare at the time, and I could barely pay the bills. But that night I was stressing out and I wanted to drink so bad. I wanted something to take the edge off. I was like, I couldn't sleep. I was like on the verge of a panic attack when suddenly in the room came this light down from like the ceiling. It came through the ceiling, and it entered my chest, and it filled me with such peace like I had never felt. It gives me chills just to talk about it. It was like filled me with an absolute sense of peace like I'd never felt before. And it was like I knew everything is all right. Everything's always been all right and always would be all right. And it was like, then the light was gone. And I was like, I fell asleep. I inevitably fell asleep, but I started like asking, what was that? What was that? I found out the next day the boy actually passed. And I didn't know if it was God or the boy that came to me to thank me for being there, because I was some mother's child on Mother's Day, and
Yeah.
so that really made me ripe, getting out of myself and being there for another human being when I normally wouldn't have been, changed my life. And so my life, it, was like a 180-degree shift to like the self-centered kind of narrative that I had going on to how can I serve? How can I be of service? And I went to Agape, I took classes there. I, did meditation. So expanding my spiritual life has been just about the biggest and most important thing in the healing, and with that is prayer, just, all the tools I can use.
Yeah. And I think that's such an important, often overlooked, TJ talks about it in Conscious Recovery, which is how we met, how important it is to address the spiritual, I would say with any condition, not just addiction and recovery, but depression, anxiety, PTSD, trauma. There is going to be a physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual component to any kind of issue that you're dealing with or that we therapists are dealing with in working with our clients. And too often that conversation or exploration of the spiritual side isn't happening. People think spirituality means religion, it must mean God. And it's so much more than all that. It's beyond just organized religion and certain philosophies and dogmas and this or that. It's much, much greater than that. But it's so important, I think, for us to explore that in the healing process as we work with clients. And I'm wondering, do you do that in your work?
I do. I mean, I think it depends on where I'm working. I do groups. I do creative expression groups, which so I try to use meditation to start the group. It depends on, I try to read the room. One thing that I learned early on from growing up in that kind of environment is how to, read the room. So, I check in with clients, but I am a big advocate for framing spirituality in a way that they can assimilate it. Like some people, like if I say God, they're thinking, wait, are you talking about that man in the sky? And it's like, no, I'm not talking about that. That was my, when I went to Catholic school, kind of the vending machine God in the sky, and it's like, I'm so grateful that I found a practical, spiritual, higher power that works for me and that I can move with throughout the day, and share with people, because I do think that therapists are afraid to go there. They're, not all therapists, but a lot of them are afraid to go there, and introduce that topic.
Yeah, agreed. And then I think we're missing out on some really valuable information that way and valuable aspects to healing, because I mean, spirituality also encompasses your sense of meaning and purpose, kind of like your existential, like, why are you here? Or are you okay even being here? I mean, I work with a lot of folks who are pretty ambivalent, especially these days, about even wanting to be here embodied in a body, and to be able to explore that with them realistically. What would it be like if you were here, if you weren't here? What would be different? I think we should not fear those conversations. We should have those conversations, because part of empowering people is to also let them know that they have some choice in their own life and their own death, and whether they were going to choose to really live, be here and live, or check out, like through addiction, for example.
Yeah. I think that if you can frame it in a way, like some people are open to hearing, about energy, about flow and following the flow. They're more open to that, but they, and it's just, you kind of just start with where they're at, I find. And it's hard sometimes when you have a group of people and they're all different places, so you have to kind of tread softly, but the spiritual healing, I mean, just like, I didn't expect to have such an incredible power, a sense of peace going to that. That was not my realm. It was not in my bandwidth. But, the thing is, I think that recovery is expanding your bandwidth. I think that healing, you need to expand your bandwidth. I think that, and I've seen a lot of people in 12-step community or other places have a narrow bandwidth. Well, this is the steps. This is how I did it. And they're reacting to something, and they put it under the umbrella, everything under the umbrella of alcoholism. I go, and it's in that kind of vagueness, like, okay, no, this is my trauma. This is a trauma response. For me, it helps to kind of name it and get clarity around it, so that I know, oh, this is codependency. No, this is not alcoholism. But I mean, I had that narrow bandwidth when I first got sober, but it's like part of my responsibility is expanding it, or it's not even my responsibility, but my desire to expand my bandwidth.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm with you. I mean, I think we need to keep doing our own work, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And as therapists, or counselors, it's like we need to stay just a few steps ahead. We don't have to be way ahead, but maybe just a few steps ahead of the clients that we're working with, so that we can, kind of be like, hey, I got a flashlight. The road, may seem dark and twisty and windy, but I got a flashlight and I'm here, and we can travel this road together. But in order to do that, I've got to be willing to look at my own shadow stuff. I got to shine that light internally first.
Right.
Do my work, and I do see it as an ever expansive, and especially energetically expansive process. And the more that I expand, the more my clients can expand, the more the world can expand, because we are in a profoundly transformative time on this planet right now.
So this is an important time on the planet, and I believe that we, are here. We've chosen to be here at this time. If you're here, it's like, how can I be of maximum service to the planet right now? What can I do? And it's like, can be overwhelming, because there's so many things that, the environment, crime, it's just, there's so much. But it's like, you find something in your little corner of the world that, where you can help somebody, whether it be your clients, whether it be a family member. It's like, things are shifting, and people are waking up, and, I believe it's a new paradigm, and sometimes it's discouraging when we see all the news and all of the, the media, but it's like, that's why I need reinforcement too. I need reinforcement. I listen to people that resonate for me, like-minded people that I need to hear them, because I get snagged. On things, on personalities or on work stuff, and it's like, I already know what holding a resentment towards my mother and how that directed my life unconsciously. So I can't afford, to have these resentment. I get them, but I recognize them. I'm aware of them, and it's like, how can I shift the energy here? When I was going through one dark night of the soul, just a really dark period, I didn't know what was going on with me. It was like a lot of trauma was unlodged. I was doing a lot of crying, and I knew intuitively that I needed to lift my vibration, my energy. So I started Zumba dancing, and I would do Zumba. I had a great instructor. He would always smile. He would just love teaching everybody how to dance. And we'd be in there dancing every week. And I'd go up to him afterwards. I go, you're my antidepressant. You are my antidepressant. Because I couldn't walk out of that class not feeling better, not feeling, it would lift me, so
Yeah.
I have to take responsibility for lifting that. And like I said earlier, expanding my bandwidth. Going into nature helps me. I know what works for me, but I didn't always know.
No, and that's why sometimes when I work with clients in recovery, I actually refer to it more as a process of discovery, because in many ways it is that. Like, what else can I discover for myself about myself, with the internal, process of inquiry, but also what can I discover about the world and the activities and the things that actually bring me joy that maybe I never knew brought me joy before. So encouraging clients to experiment with, activities, hobbies, groups. You do creative expression. So like, any type of artistic, music, dance, writing, art, whatever that entails, right? All of that can be part of that expansion and that discovery of self and other in the world.
Yeah, I think that all of that is so important. All those like different things that you mentioned. And again, in this book, Body Work, she talks about taking secrets. She says all of her art started from a secret, and to transform, that secret into art and give it new meaning is changing the narrative, and it's like, and that can come through watercolor. It can come through all types of mediums. It doesn't journaling. I did the artist's way, which was so powerful. Writing, it was like it just emptied, so much space in my head. It felt like I had been moving furniture around the room for so long, that by writing was like clearing it out. Let's just like do a home edit here. Have you seen that show, Home Edit? It's
I have not, no.
it's a show where they clear out stuff. So that's what writing for me does. It clears out stuff in my head.
Yeah, that's wonderful. What a gift, that you are being with the world and your clients and the people that read your book and all of that. Wendy, if people want to find out more about you and your work, where can they go?
So I have a website, wendyadamson.com. I have my articles and podcast listed there. And my books are both on Amazon. Mother Load, it's LOAD by Wendy Adamson, and Incorrigible. And I am just finishing up my third book that I did with my son, Ricky, about his nonprofit, which we just finished the first draft and it's being read right now. So I'm excited for that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being with us today and sharing your story and your experiences.
Well, thank you for having me. It was great talking to you.
Yeah. Any final thoughts for our audience or anything you want to leave us with?
No, I just, encourage people to try writing, try to stay open and remember that, you will hit like blocks and walls, but just try to push through. And it's very surprising. You'll hit that point where you just like the lights go on and it's like, why haven't I been doing this sooner? And well, that's what happened for me. Writing isn't for everybody, but I encourage you to give it a try.
Yeah. Yeah. Experiment, try new things. That's all part of it. It's why we're here, I think, is to be here, live life, try things, experience things. Sometimes you might fall flat on your face. Sometimes you'll soar like a bird, right? What if we could embrace all of it? Thanks again, Wendy. Thank you, listeners and viewers. If you like this podcast, please do share, comment, like, pass it on to people who might be interested in this, because my whole purpose in doing this podcast is to let people know there are many, many roads to healing. If you have, or know somebody who has a mental health diagnosis or an addiction or something that they're dealing with, there are many, many, many tools and approaches and techniques and people who can support you in that journey. So tune in next time. And thanks again for being with us.
Bye.
Thank you for joining me for this episode of Kaleidoscope of Possibilities, Alternative Perspectives on Mental Health. This has been Dr. Adriana Popescu. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe and share with others. To find out more about me, my guests, and more, please visit my website at adrianapopescu.org. See you next time.